So, I have gathered a group of men here today to talk about the future of masculinity. And some of you that are here today on this screen, I know very well, and others I know you just a bit, but I thank you for the accepting the invitation, and I'm glad you're here. And I consider all of you guys on this screen friends. Otherwise, I wouldn't have invited you, even if I know you just a little bit. And I was thinking about how to introduce this because clearly we are not a world-renowned panel on masculinity, but we are all men that are grappling what it means to be a man. And I would go so far to say that we're grappling with what it means to be a good man in the extraordinary time that we're living in. And I will call it the extraordinary time that we're living in. And I thought, especially after a comment from Corey here on the conversation between me and Nick Freerillian, that I thought it would be better if we grappled together instead of alone. So here we all are. So the first thing I would like to do is to define masculinity, because it would make sense to define some terms before we start talking about said terms. So I looked it up, and Miriam, thank you, Miriam, says the state or quality of being masculine. That's helpful. Thank you. The degree or property of being masculine or manly, manliness. Number three, the trait of behaving in ways considered typical for men. So that number three, the trait of behaving in ways considered typical for men. That's, I think, the key. And I wrote down here because we can always look to historical precedent for the answer for our time, but I do believe that our time is completely unique in human history in several ways. So I figured we would conduct this in an estuary style, but condense the first and second rounds just so that we do introductions along with our pitch at the same time, and then we go from there. So, how about we start with this guy, Mr. Henry, quick introduction, and then the pitch you would like to talk about.
Sure. I'm Henry. I've been in the corner for like officially creating stuff for less than a year, but I've been lurking since probably 2021 officially with PBK's Randos. I'm a high school English teacher and have been for 2.5 years, going on 3.5 this year. I write Lego articles on a Lego blog as well, and my work is technically probably more prolific there than it is here. And I serve in my church as a young adult leader and have been doing that for a while. Um, I don't know what else I need to say about myself. Um, do you want me to just pitch now?
Sure, fire away.
Sure.
Yeah, I got to start writing
Okay.
down names and pitches.
So if we want to use like the estuary protocol, like the personally side slash estuary cornerarily side, I was on a conversation with Christian Baxter on Saturday and it got uploaded yesterday. And I kind of like spilled my guts about my own kind of personal health experiences and the kind of impact it has on probably vocation, personal life, relationships. Um, and I'm kind of wrestling with the idea of celibacy and kind of like the state of being a eunuch and how to commit myself in a particular way to the faith in that vocationally. And I find myself in my current space and in discussion with people within like the Protestant evangelical church, finding there's not a lot of dignity with that, just as a concept, because kind of the contemporary culture right now, and not the like culture, but like corner culture. And there's a hair in my mouth. Sorry, I don't know what happened. Anyway, it's just going to stay there. So corner culture, and then also like the like movement conservatism, kind of Christian. I don't want to call it Christian nationalism, but that culture is very much right now like fight the powers, get married, have children, do the traditional thing. And I'm kind of at a spot where I'm like, I can't do that. Like, for a lot of reasons, I can't do that. And so, what function can I serve in that? So, I guess very like TLDR condensed, like my pitch is where is the dignity of the single man found, both in like the broader culture and society, and then maybe more specifically in the corner, and then in like the church space that's not Catholic or Orthodox, because they have a space and then ultimately, what function can they serve in some way that is meaningful to themselves and then meaningful to society as a whole? And that's my pitch.
Thank you, Henry. Miles.
Yeah. Wow, Henry, that's really tough to follow up. My name is
but you're
Miles.
following it whether you
I
like it or
am.
not.
I'm gonna just full speed ahead here. My name is Miles. I came out of the Lurk in Chicago and at Midwestuary and had a fantastic experience there. My wife and I posted the video following that up, sort of formally coming out of the Lurk and the TLC. Um, I'm a father of three and been married for about 11 years. Um, and really don't feel like it's necessary to get into what I do professionally, but it is along the lines of education, Henry. So, kind of right there with you, and both my parents were teachers, so I have a lot of experience in the public education space as well. Um, my pitch, um, we for me, I don't think that it's possible for me to talk about masculinity and what I believe it should be. First of all, without that individual sitting over your shoulder there. Neil, because that's who I look at in your portrait there, and yeah, that one, and and then also the instructions that were given by the disciples, the apostles. The first thing that came to my mind was First Timothy 3:7, and I don't have it memorized, but I had to look it up, and it's Paul's instructions to Timothy about the qualifications of an elder, and one of the things that the one of the concepts out of that it's First Timothy 3:1 through 7, and the concept that resonates with me and has continually resonated with me out of that passage is being above reproach. Um, so maybe we can talk about what that means to be above reproach in today's day and age, um, and defining that
Hmm.
I think is the right thing to do in pursuit of masculinity.
Cool. Gray.
Much here. Um, can you guys hear me? Okay. Sorry. Yes, my name's Gray Hamilton. I have been, well, I am a recently became a father of a 5.5 month old baby girl she is asleep right there. So if I disappear off camera, it's because she decided to start squawking. And my wife is out of town, so I'm solo right now. So we'll see how that goes. Um, I have been following the corner for 6 years or so, 7 years almost, and came out of the lurk this summer. Um, my wife and I live in Texas in Waco, where I've worked at Baylor University for the past couple of years. I lost my job in May and have been in a season of trying to discern, along with my wife, the future of our family and the vision for our family. And so I came out of the lurk this summer, really what I view to be by providence. God just dropped some breadcrumbs in my path that led to having a wonderful conversation with Jordan Hall, that officially brought me kind of out of the lurk, talking to Christian Baxter, dropping on one of PBK's live streams, and then attending Midwestuary. And that all happened within the space of like 1 month. Got to know Corey a little bit. Neil was my leader at Midwestuary of our estuary group, which was fantastic. Neil did a great job, and just had a wonderful experience there, meeting so many people. And for a pitch, I I will make one. Although I imagine my guess would be Corey's going to say something along these lines. So, Corey, I'm sure you've thought it out better than I have, but I would, yesterday Ross Bird, or maybe it wasn't yesterday, it's a few days ago, dropped an essay on leadership, on Substack. Who, if you don't know Ross, he leads a Christian fellowship, or not fellowship. What is the word I'm looking for? He leads an organization and teaches an organization that sort of disciples young Christian men and women as they leave college and enter into adulthood, and writes on Substack. And he dropped an essay about leadership, but in the beginning, a preamble on authority. And goes to a conversation that Corey and I have been talking about, specifically at Midwestuary, about sort of stemming from DC Schindler's recent work that he started to talk about authority, the nature of true authority, where it comes from, how it truly manifests, and what the lack of understanding of authority, sort of where that may rest in the stack of causality for so many of our problems, both as men in understanding masculinity, what we're called to in our specific individual context, whether it be Henry, yours and mine are vastly different, but does something like the true nature of authority help us to sort of understand how to pursue masculinity in widely varying contexts, and then the basis for that being Christ. And you can look at that in a bunch of different ways. So that would be my pitch. It's pretty wide, but I just wanted to kind of throw that, specifically the authority piece out there. Maybe it'll fit with someone else.
Corey.
Right, hey everybody. I'm Corey. I guess I've been following TLC or TLC adjacent stuff since probably late 2017. I know a lot of the people involved. I try to not be out in the open too much for a variety of reasons, but I've been married for 10 years. I am let's see, I've got 4 kids, and I've been very interested in this question for a long time. Gray, you did kind of I figured that we would probably be at least in parallel, but you already said the A word. I've been obsessed with the concept of authority for a couple of years now. I do think that it's very critical to understanding our moment, and I do see masculinity and authority as being kind of intricately linked, although I'm very much wrestling with exactly how that is. So to kind of take it in a slightly different direction from what Gray said, so I'm very interested in what Gray said for sure. Ross's article was incredible. I want to tie it also to the idea of building structures. I have this image in my mind that the masculine role, first of all, has to be defined in relationship to what it is not. So the masculine and the feminine need to be understood as a paired concept. One does not exist without the other. And I see masculinity as being what builds structure, and as femininity as what fills structure with life. So you could kind of see this idea of life without structure is kind of like a chaos, a potential uncontrolled, and structure without life in it is dead and tyrannical. You could bring in a little bit of Jordan Peterson there, but specifically, I want to look into how I think proper masculine authority has to do with holding tension. And I think that building a structure that can be filled with life has a lot to do with holding tension in a way that requires perception and wisdom, and particularly humility. Because in order to give space for life to exist, it's, anyone who's been married for more than 5 minutes knows you can't force it. And the kind of humility that's required is something that is way beyond my natural capacity to undertake. So I guess I realize that was kind of abstract, but maybe we can ground it a little bit. And I'll say the key words, though, are following after authority, or tension, holding tension, and humility.
Thank you, Corey. Dan.
Yeah, I'm Dan. Can you hear me okay? Hear me okay. Father of 3 girls. I'm 44 years old, live in Virginia. Definitely appreciate the pitches so far. I've been thinking a lot about the holes in the teaching of masculinity that I didn't know were holes until the last 5 years or so. And specifically, in light of recent events, I wanted to talk a little bit about fear as a relevance realization focuser and or hijacker, the way that it can direct our attention. I want to make the case that perhaps fear has gotten a little bit of a bad rap, or at least a low resolution rap. Of course, we're to fear God. That's the beginning of wisdom. It says so in Proverbs. I believe that. But to be completely fearless is, I think, in some sense, to be ignorant. So I've struggled to find the balance with what is an appropriate response to fear insofar as it directs my attention in a world of infinite possibilities, the degree to which one should prepare for the future versus take things one day at a time. And specifically on a landscape that is one of psychological warfare, torrents of information, more than we can possibly deal with or verify or invalidate. The way that we're forced to rely on trusted interlocutors to try to help make sense of that landscape, and the way that we as men can coordinate our efforts based on a shared understanding, which admittedly is extremely hard to find in the first place, given that we're all having such different perspectives and perhaps information streams. And to further muddy the waters, Jesus as lion and lamb, I think maybe hasn't been, at least in the circles that I grew up in, given his fair due. I think there's been a lot of maybe caricaturizing Jesus as only the lamb. And as it pertains to our masculinity, I think we need to understand Jesus as lion and what that looks like. So apologies because it's a little bit of a sloppy scattershot pitch, but those are some of the moving pieces there.
Hey, Dan, I got a question. Did you mention that you were a husband as well?
I didn't, but I should have. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just making sure.
Yes, I am.
Thank you, Dan. Chad.
Sure.
Good evening. My name is Chad. I'm so grateful to be on this call with these 7 dwarfs, which was not planned that way, but I think it's very interesting. See, I'm a master mechanic, journeyman tile setter. I am a member of and attend a Lutheran church. I am a husband for coming up on 5 years in October. A father of a daughter who is 7 months old today. Was so good to we eat at the dinner table together, and that's been a real joy. And just watching this human being bloom is outstanding. I've been playing on the internet with in this corner of the internet for several years, 4 years, I think. And not to be too vain, but I think Dan is taking my image right now, and I don't know why that is. Is that what's happening? Because I don't know how the recording is coming out. I guess it doesn't really matter, does it? You can't see my face anyways. So, all right. I'm also I a lot of my spiritual formation took place in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, hence the this kind of pseudo anonymity that I'm playing with here. And I tried to abide by that. And we'll get to that, I think. I haven't my whole life felt like much of a man, I guess. And it's only really more so in the last few years where I've really, I think, began to really latch on to that identity. Not to say that I felt like a woman, but or anything like that, but very much felt like a child for most of my life. So becoming a man has been the greatest thing I never wanted to do. Um, all right. So my pitch, I guess. And by the way, I want to say, Henry, welcome. That was one of the most outstanding pitches I've ever heard in my life. Um, not to call you out, but that was just so good. All right. So yeah, I think my pitch would be something like um, the idea of um, paying attention to paying attention to um, how I am becoming more of a man on a day-to-day basis, trying to utilize the tools that God has given me to be accountable, to try to just be more responsible, and then really trying to just be the how do I say this? I guess at the end of the day, it would be how do I become a robust and mundane man? That's what I want to be. I want to be an average man that's okay living in the mundane, who is uh, secure as a husband and as a father, and as somebody who is seeking God, but also um, trying to carry that to other men. And I noticed that, Henry, Miles, uh, Gray, Corey, and these are all guys who are all teachers of some sort. I know Neil is as well. I mean, they're doing something. They're either coaches or something like that. And I do the same thing. I think as it relates to my trying to help other men get sober, specifically men get sober. And I have a thing I'd like to read as part of the pitch. Sorry about this long ass pitch. um, the quote is out of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it says, "Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances." And that's just my experience. And if I'm cut off from that path, then yeah, things get nasty. So that's my pitch.
Thank you, Chad. So I'm Neil, been married for 10 years. I have one daughter who's 9 years old. I've been a Roman Catholic for 7 years, and I've been involved in TLC directly involved for about 2 years now. Came out of the lurk on this guy's channel. Hopefully, I hope I'm not recording just people who are talking. I hope I'm recording all the screens, but I don't know. We'll see. I think I have it set up that way to record all of us. And my pitch is, what is the relationship between masculinity and brotherhood? And why would it even be worthwhile to build brotherhood? Shouldn't we just be good men, righteous men, above reproach in our own little uh, communities, our own churches, our own, shouldn't we just be doing the in-person thing, being, focused on the people that are not hundreds, if not thousands of miles away? So are we, what are we doing Is it just for ego, vanity that we're doing this online thing? Um, I'll put my cards on the table. I do think TLC is primarily a brotherhood. I think it is a brotherhood in the right spirit. And I think brotherhood is the key to proper masculinity because I suspect in a culture with very, very strong guardrails where there's no opportunities to go off the rails, you probably don't need brotherhood to the same extent. But in a culture where it's the opposite, then all the forces towards doing the good or doing the thing that's right have to be attract forces. And the forces, I think, holding us each to the highest possible standard is that we are judged each according to that standard within the bounds of a brotherhood, whether that's online or in person. And I think that's important to call ourselves and each other to the highest possible standard because there's a lot we could lose if we fall from that standard. If we care about the brotherhood, if we care about the community that we're in communion with. Um, yeah. So I think brotherhood is important. I think it's important also for young men to have a group to aspire to be part of and individuals to want to emulate, but not just a single individual, but a community of individuals that have different strengths and different weaknesses that they can emulate. So that's my pitch. Um, yeah. What's the relationship between masculinity and brotherhood? Okay. Um, we good to point? All right. Start with Henry.
Sure. I think based on the pitches, I think I want to point to Chad's because I think I like his summary of what he's presenting, the idea of the summary, like of the robust and the mundane. I think that's really cool because one of the things that I find myself sitting with a lot of the time and part of my motivations for current kind of considerations is the sometimes the dissonance between like Jesus did all these cool things, the apostles did all these cool things, church fathers did all these cool things, and then it's like, 21st century America, suburbia, public school, etc. And you're like, these do not add up. We are not being like, we're not in the gladiator arenas getting eaten by lions kind of deal, right? And so how do we make that life in the faith or just make that life kind of obviously we don't want to necessarily incur that, but right, but where is it meaningful and fulfilling? I also think the reason why I vote for Chad's first is because I think Neil's pitch falls really well under that and helps inform living in the robust and the mundane. Like having a brotherhood is really integral to that. So my point is ultimately to Chad, but then second to Neil, I guess.
Just 1 point. Thank you, sir. Miles.
Yeah, I'm gonna point at you, Neil. I actually kind of thought that everything fell underneath your pitch, uh, so I guess I'm already some contention there, but not in any mean spirit or anything like that. I think there's tremendous value in identifying a brotherhood, what the attributes of that brotherhood are. Um, the concept of shadow patriarchy has come up recently. I was waiting for someone to. I almost pitched it, but I held on to it. Mostly because it wasn't me who brought it to the corner. So, but I think that we could also get into what that looks like, what that is as a group, and on an individual level in a discussion about brotherhood. So I'm going with you, Neil.
Cool. Thank you, Miles. Gray.
Um, I'm pretty torn between I'm pretty torn between Corey and Neil. I think Neil, I will ultimately point to yours as well. Um, maybe because I feel as though almost everybody, some part of everybody's pitch, would be very useful in elucidating um, through the frame of brotherhood. And for me personally, the what I've been hoping to continually um, not harp on, but bring the conversation back to those conversations that I've been a part of since I've sort of come out of the lurk. It's been community, and how we can best, if you'll allow me the metaphor, fight this fight together, and the necessity of that togetherness. And so it strikes a chord with me to talk about these things through the lens of the relationship between brotherhood and masculinity. So I'll point to you, Neil, for sure.
Cool. Thanks, Gray. Corey.
Man, I am finding it hard to pick because I love all of them a lot. And I think that it's all related enough to where it's probably going to all get talked about. But ultimately, I actually want to point at Henry's. Um, I think it's the stuff that you brought up, and I didn't get a chance to watch your interview with Christian, so I'd be curious to know more about the specifics of what you're talking about. But I think that when we talk about, I heard you say, what kind of function can you serve? And then, maybe you in particular, and then men in general, both. And I think, the question of what is the function of a single man, begs the question, what also is the function of a man who's not single? And I feel like that's is a good grounding. Particularly, I'm interested to hear your story, to be honest with you, if you're willing to share a little bit. Um, but I think that it's a nice practical standing place to look at the concept of masculinity and what it means to each of us in particular. But I'm also interested in everything else that was mentioned.
Cool. Thanks, Corey. Dan.
I'll point at yours, Neil.
I love that simplicity.
Chad.
Um, yeah, I'm gonna point to Corey and Henry, but specifically in Corey's pitch, he said that you can't have the masculinity without the femininity, and they are like they're tied together there, and so that in conjunction with Henry's the the eunuch bit, very interesting to me. Because yes, so that's it. Yeah, yep.
I want to point to Dan. What stuck with me, what you said, Dan, was holes in the teaching of masculinity. The what you also mentioned about fear potentially being good. Yeah, I think there is something there. I think we've been so running we've so been taught to lean into our fear, but fear our fear. Ironically, both continuously be in communion with fear, but then also fear our fear, or have this kind of dread over it. So I think that's a very interesting thing. But I think what inspires me the most is just the absolute dearth of paths, viable paths that are hopeful, that young men can see themselves in, where they can say, of this generation, say, that's the life that I want, or that's the life that I want to aim towards. Yeah. So anyway, that's the holes in the teaching of masculinity. And yeah, so if anyone wants to take it and run with any of these, I'm fine, because I think the brotherhood topic does tie into all of these. And yeah, so whoever wants to jump in, go for it.
I want to hear more from you since you won.
All right. All right. Now I'm going to talk about Dan. I'm going to talk about Dan's topic. So I want to write something down. Or I want to read something I wrote down. Okay. I wrote down, I really think the question of masculinity is a question on the future of brotherhood, but I realized that there's another element. And it's actually the one element is a combination of things, but the one element that makes men respect one another. Because you can't just form a brotherhood, even if you have a common ideal. So let's say all the men say Christ is the common ideal. That's the vertical. But the horizontal of brotherhood is when the the men that are part of that brotherhood respect one another, like really value and respect one another. And what I wrote down, that
Mm.
which makes men respect each other is mastery, is excellence. It doesn't have to be at a particular thing, but something that if there's something that someone does that's masterful, that's excellent, or even if you can see that seed of potential mastery, you can see the starting point where it's like, I'm watching this guy because this guy, he's got something. And when you can see that and it's and so like I think the future of brotherhood is really this combination of two masteries, and it's a mastery of competence, like really good at something. But then it's the other thing that Miles that you were talking about, which I wrote down as the mastery of virtue. Like what does it mean to be virtuous? Like we don't talk about in all these like the Ezra Klein conversations, and there's other conversations about the future of education. It's like all these educational experts, and not once was virtue mentioned. Drove me absolutely nuts because it doesn't matter how good the technology gets. Like, in fact, it's actually necessary to develop virtue in direct proportion to how strong the technology gets. If if the virtue stays here and the temptations go here, 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 that's a problem. Like the virtues have to grow. And so, yeah, so like the brotherhood aimed at the right spirit would be something like a a mutual uh a mutual pact or aim. Aim is probably a better thing where you are encouraged and drawn to mastering virtue in all respects. But at the same time, you are encouraged and drawn in your genuine talents that you have, and those can be fostered and brought into an enrichment for the entire community. So, and that gets, I think, to what Corey was saying about building building the space or creating the opportunities for something to flourish, for life to flourish within the space. Yeah.
Can I say something quick?
Yeah.
About I think the reason why that virtue is so powerful is, I mean, there are guys that I've worked with, um, in all these different fields, and like they can be super excellent at their job, but I think when I see a guy, um, uh, or when I meet somebody who kind of like who falls short and has, you can see their shortcomings, and then you watch how they actually deal with that. That in conjunction with the excellence is awesome for me. And that's where I think virtue is so powerful because, yeah, as you said, like you can have all the technology, and as you said, there's also going to be all this temptation as you going forward. So, what good is excellence if you can't actually match your shortcomings, which are inevitably going to be there? And so that's, I think, like in the fellowship that I come from in AA, we say that we are brothers in our shortcomings rather than our virtues. But that's because it's kind of like this weird inverted thing that happens. It's yeah. Yep.
Yeah, can I pick up on that a little bit? Like, I'm really glad that you drew out the vertical and the horizontal, Neil. And like Chad, what you're kind of pointing to is this. I think you're right, Neil, that I hadn't thought about it that way before, but there's the vertical, and I really think that authority, I'm going to use the A word again, has a lot to do with beholding and like perception, like what you're giving your attention to, what you're worshiping. Um, and there's something like I sound like a broken record because I bring it up almost every time that the subject comes up. But the Four Loves, C.S. Lewis's book, when he talks about friendship and how it's kind of this recognition of it's like you too, you see it too, and that immediate bond that happens. And I think that part of what that is, listening to you talk, and both of you, Neil and Chad, there's like a recognition of how we each are in the same sort of spot of humility, recognizing our total shortcoming and our incapacity to bear the responsibility that we're called to. And yet we're mutually striving for the same thing. And there's like a mutual embodiment that when you're really like, I think about men's groups that churches try to do. And I honestly, I've kind of gotten a little bit sick of some of them because like, oh, if we have cigars and drink whiskey together, then, doing manly things. And that's a good men's night. I can't remember who it was that said recently, you got to be striving for something. There's got to be something, and not something empty, like something meaningful that you got to be trying to do together. And the mutual beholding when you're standing shoulder to shoulder, working towards a goal of like a transcendent goal, something to do with the good, the true, and the beautiful, which is, that points us to Christ. I can say as a Christian, uh, I feel like that image is getting us really close to me for both brotherhood and masculinity. There's something about that structure that includes the horizontal and the vertical that we can enter into together. And you get really excited when you meet somebody else. Like you said, the excellence. If somebody's really excellently striving, even if they're in a really bad place, maybe they're not doing that well, but they're really giving it their all. Like, what is there that's more inspirational than that? What makes you want to come alongside somebody more than that?
Um, so I would, gosh, this is such a great direction for the conversation. Coloring some of that in, like from my experience, maybe some of you guys, most of you may know that I come from a sports background. I'm a tennis coach. And I played competitive tennis my entire life at an elite level, increasingly, and then played Division I tennis at Ole Miss for a top 15 or so team in the country, and was ranked quite high. And then played some professional tennis. And tennis is an individual sport. Your whole life, you may have a doubles partner, and you may have an academy of other guys and girls you train with. But even within those environments, it's quite directly competitive. You're not teammates in any way. Like oftentimes, especially if you're at the top sort of academy, the guys you're training with are oftentimes also your competition directly when you go to compete around the country. And then you get to college, and all of a sudden it's a team sport, and all these new dynamics come in play. And I saw that as a player and as a kid, 18-year-old kid to 22, but then also have been coaching in college for the last 7 years, and so have seen it from the other side of things. And as a player, I was a non-Christian, and as a coach, I was a Christian the entire time. And when I got to Ole Miss, I had a great coach who's an amazing mentor that really almost single-handedly taught me what it really meant to pursue mastery. And he would when the day I walked into his academy when I think I just turned 15, and I hit with him the first time, and he told me, he asked me what my goals were. I told him they were all, what we would call outcome goals. And he said, okay, we are going to toss all those to the wind. We're going to set your goal at being a professional tennis player, being top 100 in the world. So effectively, for a 15-year-old kid who I was, that's like the holy grail, almost unreachable. So he effectively said, we can have one outcome goal, and it's going to be basically unreachable, definitely out of your control. And the rest of it is, but the North Star is going to be becoming the greatest player you could possibly be. And maybe that will help you reach the outcome goal you want, and maybe not. So I go to college with this being like my background of like how I saw myself as a player, what I was pursuing, how I went about my day-to-day life in practice and training. And I get to Ole Miss, and our senior leader was a guy who had just been the SEC Player of the Year, was a 4-time All-American, no, scratch that, 6-time All-American, a legend, effectively, an incredible player. And I remember the first week he was 30 minutes late to practice twice. Once because he was on a coffee date with a girl. Um, it's unbelievable even saying it. He regularly gave subpar effort, but when it came to game day, he was able to show this just really almost otherworldly level of mastery. He's still one of the most skilled tennis players I've ever seen. Um, but my respect for him evaporated after 2 weeks because of that lack of virtue and respect for the brotherhood of the team. Don't get me wrong, he wanted the team to win. He wanted the team to win. But he wanted the team to win because he wanted him to win. Um, and he wasn't willing to, or he didn't embody the kind of humility necessary to actually lead a group, such that the mastery that he did possess could sort of fully motivate and fill the group of which he was at the top of the hierarchy. And I proceeded to watch this very similar pattern play out, man, for pretty much my whole college career, and then getting into coaching. And not only teams that I have coached, but having friends in coaching, these same patterns over and over and over of the highly talented, maybe even sometimes very hardworking player who does not possess the humility, selflessness, virtue to be able to die to himself and therefore raise the team up. And so I was part of teams that had the capability as tennis players to be national championship contenders. 100%. The furthest we ever made it was the Sweet 16, not because of ability, but because we did not have cohesion that came from a humble servant leader who also had mastery. And I've seen even a couple times the opposite, where we have had guys on the team, and almost every time there's always guys on the team who are upperclassmen. Seeing this in teams I've coached, it breaks my heart, who have a humble servant leader heart but do not possess mastery. And so they cannot command the respect of the guys who possess greater mastery than them,
You need both.
such that they can raise the team. It's both. And as coaches, like it is like a dizzying. I can't tell you how many dozens of hours of conversation I've had with my fellow coaches of how do we. It's not a simple problem to try to raise either side, because if you have a guy with mastery, it's like oftentimes they got there, especially in sports, by pursuing what was best for me in every moment. Me, people showering me with everything I need, and me pursuing, you know, status and all of this. And that's what helped get me to this level of mastery in sports. This very, very often. And then there's the virtue side, and they often just seem to be like this, and it's really hard to get somebody. It's so rare, and that's why in sports it is so clearly celebrated when you find someone. And the best teams almost always have at least one, if not two, people who embody both of those. So that doesn't get us any further, sort of abstractly, but it just is like to color that in. It's gosh, it's something I've seen so clearly in my day-to-day life.
I want to jump in here. I can't wait, actually. Gray, I think that you kind of lobbed it up there for me. Um, I think we're all here because we have someone that started something that is that person for all of us. And we've all connected with him in one way or another. Henry, I know that you've said that you've tried to jump on a couple of different live streams with him and missed him. So hopefully at some point you get that chance to connect with PVK. But whether it's PVK or Rod or Jordan or Kale, these are men who go before us, who have taken the time to try to be involved with us on our level, to hear our stories, to bring us into the pursuit of virtue. So we have I mean, there's superstars all over. That's what I would call that player who's the
Mm-hmm.
six-time whatever is a superstar. I'm very much a sports guy myself. I'm a coach. I've done. My dad was a coach. I've been around coaching forever. I'm very much a sports guy. Gray, maybe we can connect there sometime. But that's a superstar, right? The superstar of the TLC to me, whether he wants it or not, is PVK. But you have superstars who lead with selfishness, who don't have time for anyone, who are late to practice, who are not setting very good examples and have no interest in virtue, but are for whatever reason charismatic by inherently charismatic by birth, and that's just who they are as a person. Um, or you have the men who do the dang work and who do care about virtue and who do care about others and who do lay down their lives for others. And I've sort of through comments told PVK that like, hey, I'm here because of your heart, because I see his heart for others even here in the corner. But look at others surrounding him, whether that be the men that I've mentioned, or John Heers, or the others that do want to be involved in establishing this pursuit of virtue. And I think that's where the horizontal and the vertical come in, right? So the horizontal, where we come together in a brotherhood because we are pursuing the same thing. And it's like recognizing um, with openness, because that's what was set in motion by the leader of this thing that we're doing, right? Is Paul's openness to others, to hearing their story, and to in my perspective, loving them regardless of where they come from or what they bring or don't bring, what they contribute or don't contribute. And having met him in person, I've seen it in person as well, right? Just in the brief communication and connection that I was blessed to have with him in person. I've actually said about Neil and the others who are sort of leading this thing that it is, this TLC, that rarely do you meet people that you have high expectations for and they exceed those expectations. But
Yeah,
when
I
we
mean,
went to Midwestuary, that happened.
mhm. Well, when I think of guys that are like you're mentioning, like do we say like does the TLC not to get too navel gazy, uh yeah, the male navel gaze, uh anyways, like does the TLC is the TLC born born out of PBK's making videos talking about Jordan Peterson, or is the TLC born um, in Patterson, New Jersey, uh, as where in PBK's kind of upbringing, or in Jordan Peterson's upbringing and their fathers and things like that? And I think um, I think and so like the mastery and the virtue thing, the guy that you're talking about there, like that's a foundational thing. I think these guys they have um, these foundations that, and I don't know, is that because it's interesting, is the talent almost seems like a God-given gift but can be squandered, I guess, in a way, like, just because like the guy can win six whatever, but he can't be the teammate, and or like an excellent teammate. I wonder. I just kind of, not to besmirch the dude, but like I wonder what like his upbringing was like, or what kind of values were instilled in him, like um, yeah, the guys that I look up to, um, are guys that helped me out. They actually they yeah, it's like in their DNA to well, there's this idea that the AA has where they talk about in order to keep it, you got to give it away, right? in order to keep your sobriety, you got to give it away. And so the way you do that is you sit with the guy and you read with them and you show them the things that, your sponsor showed you, and you show them how to take the steps and do inventory and how to seek God and how to help others. And and then you just keep doing that over and over and over. And it kind of shapes, it becomes a part of who you are as a person. And so is virtue God given, like the talent, or is that something that must be cultivated? You know,
Well, I want to bring Henry into this conversation, and I'm gonna build off of exactly what you said, Chad, because I actually want to tie this directly to Jesus. I want to talk about Jesus. Um,
Me too.
I don't so I don't have a son. So obviously if I had a son, that would be a obvious and evident way to teach past the role model from myself or the things I believe, the things I value down to my son. Um, and but when I look at Jesus, he had no biological children of his own. But I also think of the way Jesus called his apostles. Um, when I made it a point to go after individual people in the corner, and I look really for two things. And both of these things are not left brain like me calculating. It's like these are two things that just hit me. And one is like that relentless pursuit of virtue or the good. It's like really, really feeling like everything we do matters. Like when I see that in a person, that if that person has this sense that like everything they do matters, you can't teach that. I don't know how to instill that sense of like gravity. I don't know what else to call it. Like everything. Um, but it's not enough because there needs to be like that spark or that shining light. What Peterson would say, like something glinting in the darkness about someone, about that thing. Um, and I suspect that, Jesus, there's this one scene in the Bible, I call it a scene, but it is a scene where the rich young ruler comes to Jesus and the rich young ruler, and I just imagine Jesus like sipping on a can of Coke or something, having talked to like 50 people, and Jesus is just really bored. He's tired for the day, and he's like, "Yeah, yeah, fine. Bring the next guy." And the guy's like, "Lord, Lord, what should I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus, sipping on his Coke, is like, "Yeah, well, you gotta like, like honor your mother and father and like do this." And Jesus is like, and the guy's like, "Lord, Lord, I've done all that." And then Jesus like, all right, he throws the Coke away and he actually looks at the guy, stares at the guy. And it says he looks at the guy and he loves him. That's what it says. And it's like he actually bothered, like he gave him the default like shallow answer, right? And then the guy keeps pushing. So it's like, all right, Jesus is like, I'm gonna give a shit about you. I know Jesus loves all of us equally, but there's this hierarchical love where Jesus like looks at him and loves him. And it's because the guy is like pushing. The guy has that spark, that aspiration. And then Jesus is like, all right, here's the deal. All you got to do is give up everything. Come follow me. You know. And that's mad. Like yeah. So um and I also think of like who is my brother? Who is my sister? Um and I think of Jordan Hall's Senius, you know? When he talks about, I don't know how many of you have heard him talk, because that was a while ago that he talked about that. And how does I was just listening to what's his face? Who's the Beato, Rick Beato, music guy.
Yeah.
And he's talking about how like no scenes are forming now, and like there's no like Irish music scene or this scene because everything's just this homogenous gray blob goo where everybody's the same. And I was thinking to myself like, wait, maybe the music scene is something that was a local phenomenon specific to music, and maybe scenes are always forming, but the scenes are in relation or proportion to whatever technology or whatever the social currents or whatever the spirits are descending down on high on that particular moment. And another thing he said about the scenes is like because music is immediately accessible anytime, anywhere, then there's no like sacrifice or difficulty or in becoming part of the scene. And and then I was thinking to myself, well, like anybody with enough time and attention could just like become part of TLC, except it gets back to the two things we've been talking about. It gets back to the mastery. It's very hard to become very good at something, and mastery of yourself and the virtue. It's very hard to become a master of yourself. It's more difficult than ruling a city, it turns out. Um, yeah, sorry. I meant to pivot this over to Henry. So, yeah. What?
I guess I'll pick it up. I have a couple different, not directions, but I've been picking up on threads. And first off, Corey stole everything I wanted to talk about friendship with the C.S. Lewis Four Loves quote, like straight out of my mouth. So I was like, because like that was exactly what I wanted to say. But I can
I
still
think that
spin
means
it.
we're brothers now.
I think so. Like real OG. Four Loves is great. So I taught this to my like I guess peers because I'm 24 and I'm running a young adult group. There's something kind of weird about that, but I was like, yeah, I'm going to teach the four loves. I'm going to talk about how they relate directly back to the love of the Father, the love of God. And I was like, friendship's really hard because Lewis describes it as something like unto the angels. It's a spiritual in nature, and it's not something that Jesus ever uses as an example, except when he's in the upper room and he's like, no longer do I call you servants because servants do not know the business of the master, but I call you my friends. And I was like, okay, we're friends in Jesus, so what does that mean? If Lewis says that we're all looking at the same goal and we're aspiring for the same ideal, then if we're friends with Jesus, then we should have the same ideal as him. And that we should come to hopefully have the what no way you too want to see the world restored. What no way you too wish to see, right, the will of the Father done. No way I didn't think that anybody else had that idea, right? Not that we have that epiphany of ourselves, but that he imparts that upon us. And so I'm trying to figure I lost the plot. That's the thing, but that's the Jesus thing. And so if we're looking at brotherhood, we have brotherhood with one another in that like shared experience. But we have brotherhood with Jesus, maybe not in the explicit like let me hang out with my guys, with my friends, men's discipleship, however like the lame-o boomer church wants to do it, but like we have a shared goal with Jesus because we're friends with him and he's invited us into that project. And oh, that's the other thing. Jesus is the embodiment of living out that tension that we're discussing, right? Of mastery and humility. He is the absolute like epitome of that, right? How do you handle the tension of being, right? This the Son of God and the like inheritor, right, of the kingdom and the deliverer of the kingdom, and then also be in flesh. And how do you speak to, right, the political scene of the time with the Pharisees and Rome and like the other sects, and at the same time be able to do, right, let the little children come to me. Like he lives in tension. His life is tension, and he holds it so well. I had I had an experience at a Catholic church one time. I was at Epiphany for whatever reason. Not Epiphany. It's the thing where the Eucharist is just sitting there. Adoration. I was at adoration,
Yep.
and there's this big Jesus crucifix, and he's like hanging up over the thing, and I like cried because the way I was seeing it in my superhero comic book thing, like the way I live with that, it's like he was holding like the cross back at bay. It's like the Superman like against the train, like holding it from us as like a safety. Not that he was hanging there, but that he holds it back from us, that ultimate thing. And I was like, he holds it so well, is what I like kind of wept over. And so Jesus holds that tension really well. And so I guess this is really vague because I don't know if I can do the concrete thing of like, well, what does it mean for Jesus to hold the tension? But Jesus holds that tension. And Jesus is a master, and as well as like pursuit of like is virtuous and is excellent in these things. And that's the ultimate model. Right. And so I don't think that you can do, sorry, let me look at the notes because I'm trying to tie the things. He is the embodiment of the masculinity, but he's the embodiment, right, of the model for brotherhood insofar as like the goal, the virtue, and the type of tension we're probably to hold. That's really difficult, and that's going to take an eternity to figure out, and then some. Um, I think that's all I got. I had some other points about fearlessness that was just like a lame comic reference, and then I had something about the feminine, but I'll put that on hold. So that's all I got right now because that's where we're at the conversation.
What's your Dan?
Yeah.
Well, the thing I was thinking about just now was actually back to some of Gray's comments about mastery and the image of the guy who's super talented and he picks up the racket and just dazzles you, but then you're like, eh. But I think we realize we're all in a moment that's beyond even the most talented of us. So I think that's going to work in our favor in some respect. And frankly, I think it's why, you see a guy of the caliber of Jordan Hall kind of going from whatever life he's living in Silicon Valley to the mountains of North Carolina, talking to guys like us. Right? I mean, and that brings me some comfort because I'm not that guy. And I'm like, oh, cool, we're in the same boat. like we both need each other. And it, to the extent that I have talent, shoot, now I can't remember who said this, so I'm going to kind of piggyback on somebody's comment. It doesn't matter who it was, but when I drop my kids off at school and I'm like pulling out and I see the dad who's like, fumbling, getting his 3 kids out of the minivan too. Like, I pray for them. And yeah, sure, they're in different grades and I'll probably never know the kids. I might not even run into the dad, but it doesn't matter. The brotherhood is palpable, at least on my end. And I think that that's an inevitability with the direction that we're going. Like, I think sooner or later, we're all going to realize that, the price of the cost of not having brotherhood has been artificially low, to put it in economic terms. It's been cheapened. That facade has been ripped away, and the masks are off. And I think anybody who's not completely asleep realizes the tenuous nature of this moment, and that we all, it's like we're in a boat rowing together, and like if everybody's not fully committed, we're all done. So there's really nothing to talk about. Like we need everybody firing on all cylinders. And it doesn't matter if you're the least talented guy around, like whatever you can contribute, it's needed. And so that gives me some hope. What is discouraging to me is I feel like there's a lot of people, good people, frankly, who still haven't kind of realized that yet. And that brings me back to what I was saying about fear. At a glance, I don't want to use fear as a motivator, right? But I think that might be a low resolution take that I need to unpack. I think maybe I've just been trained to kind of have an aversion to that because I've been told that it's naughty. But like I've been out in the woods and encountered a bear before, and I had a fear response, and my thought wasn't just like, oh well, like I'm only supposed to fear God. Like that would just be stupid. Like
Yeah, but you're 6'13", Dan.
Yeah, I mean that the bear's lucky. He was probably more scared than me, but be that as it may, the point remains. And so anyway, so with respect to using fear as an attention getting mechanism, I know that it's incumbent on me to be a good steward, to keep my house in order first, so to speak. But, to be honest, I'm doing the best I can with that, and maybe I could do better. I could probably certainly do better with more brotherhood in my life, and I like to think that I could help others to do better too. But I also know that no matter how well I keep my house in order at this point, like we need to keep our community in order. And part of the issue now is I I don't think some of my immediate community realizes kind of like what we're up against. And so I want to kind of like snap us out of that, but I want to do it in the right way. And maybe, you know, I don't mean to be like narcissistic, like, oh, it's up to me to like wake up the people or whatever, like sound like Alex Jones or something. But I mean,
Corey, before you pick up the ball, I just want to toss something in your direction, actually. Jesus as carpenter or craftsman, as the arena maker, versus Jesus as agent with 12 other schmucks trying to save the world within the arena that he crafted to begin with before the foundations of the world. Take it.
Oh man, just a softball there. No, I mean, so I wanted to, maybe we can tie that one in towards the end. We'll see if we can get there. But I wanted to bring two things to what Dan was saying there. Um, Man, I don't know if I can juggle three things at once. But that I think a lot about how the responsibility that we have. So thinking a lot, authority is not identical to masculinity, but it's hard for me to not think of it in terms of authority. So I'm just going to kind of go off of that for a minute. Um, Thinking of the responsibility that we all have, because every one of us has authority that's been given to us. And I think a big part of masculinity is wielding it properly, recognizing your place, right? Everyone has different levels of mastery, different levels of talent that have been given to them, and that's not necessarily in our control. Um, there's a recognition of where you're at. And every one of us is somewhere, you know, if you want to make it a simple hierarchy of mastery or something like that, I don't think that's the thing so much as it is recognizing that you have some authority. And what that means is you have to take responsibility for what you see, for what has been given to you, for the talents that you have that you see. And I think, you know, the authority is two directions. Like if you're authority, I love the faithful centurion, right? I too am a man under authority, right? I have people over me who tell me what to do. I also have people under me. I tell them go here and he goes. I tell him go here, he comes, right? And so it's the two-way. You always saw Jesus going out to pray on the mountainside by himself, right? He's got his upward orientation. And then he's got when he's with his subordinates, if you like, the people that he's responsible for. And what was he primarily responsible for? I really think it's something to do with revealing what he's able to see, right? The person who has more authority, and maybe even the person with what we're calling mastery, is a person who perceives more of the world. Maybe not just in propositions, but even in the way you move your body. Like you have more of a optimal grip on reality, if you like. You have more wisdom. You've got more capacity to see. No one has ever seen God, but the only begotten Son who is in the bosom of the Father, he has made him known. Right? That's in preamble Gospel of John. I feel like that there's something really important to what you're talking about, Dan, where I'm really fascinated with conversion stories and like what makes people snap, what makes people flip, what makes people wake up to the fact that the way they saw the world prior to now actually isn't accurate, and they have to change the way, like, not just they have to change, they are compelled to do differently because they now see differently. I don't know if that's something that can be forced. And this is where I wrestle with the tension that you're talking about with fear. Jordan Peterson said that beauty, if you understand it properly, is terrifying. And I think that it has to do with this idea that I think that beauty is actually the thing that is capable of coming in and waking people up, because it's a thing that comes from outside of you, like the eros thing. And it draws you, it impels you. It's what's the thing that Vervaeke was talking about? The compulsion, he's been throwing the word around and it's escaping right now. This thing where you're drawn to something and you're impelled, like you're forced to it, but you want it. It's not like you are upset that you're being drawn into this thing because it's forcing you to see things differently. That's kind of what happens in a conversion. I think that's kind of what you're wanting to see in men. And there is a fear that's associated with it, because to recognize that your worldview is completely wrong a psychologist would say that that is naturally associated with a lot of negative emotion. It's associated with fear. It's associated with the fact that, oh no, the ground that I'm standing on that I thought was secure is definitely not secure. That's a horrible feeling to experience. And yet it's the moment of the highest potential where you can start moving in a new direction. Um, I don't know how to, it's like, it is an environmental thing to what Neil kind of threw in there. Beauty, I don't know, I'm stretching out on a limb here to tie this in. I think beauty has more to do with the arena that you find yourself in and how it discloses reality to you than the content, say, or the objects within the cognitive landscape. It's less about what you say and more about what you model, maybe something like that. Um, Jesus modeled both in like just his creation of the cosmos and also in his very particular instantiated leadership of his disciples. So that's my attempt to tie in what Neil said. I think there actually is something to that, but I'll let someone else
Yeah,
try to
I want
unravel
to
it.
say something real quick. Like when you're just talking, I was thinking of when I see my daughter and I spend time with my daughter. There's some nothing more beautiful than I've ever experienced, and so it's not. I don't know if I guess that's kind of ironic, but not really. I mean, it's like when I think real beauty is a glimmer of uh maybe telos or something. It's like you see the infinite in like these glimmering moments, and that's why it's so terrifying when I see my when I think about this idea of beauty as terror. At like I remember standing there watching my wife come down the aisle, and it was like the most electric thing. Or when I'm standing there holding her hand, and she's giving birth to Carolyn, and and it's not necessarily fear, but it's like this weird, this incredible thing that I find really difficult to put into words. This is why we have poetry and things like this, because it's the best way to kind of convey something like that, to give you a glimmer of telos, like the ultimate telotic moment, uh, eternity, God, the Christ, all of that. It's like it is terrifying, and then in those moments you realize there's like it's infinite. There's no end to it, and but the humility, I guess, is like you ought not take that for granted, because maybe there is no end to it, but maybe I drop the ball and I lose access to that. That's terrifying.
Henry.
Wait, just real quick, I want to say something, because what you said to Corey about the Christ having this mastery, this ability to to convey something, but what he did so perfectly is like he didn't just come out and tell you what the answer was. He said would just like boom, like drop it on you, and you'd be like, what? And it's like exactly the thing that you need to hear, and that's what a real master does to the apprentice. He's like, I'm gonna drop it right here for you. Good luck. So yeah, sorry, I don't want to. Go ahead, Henry. Sorry, man.
All good. I kind of wanted to follow up on like the idea of like the fear and like maybe even beauty. I think fear is probably essential in maintaining that which is beautiful or that which is worthwhile. So here's my lame comic comparison. So Daredevil is the man without fear. And like what does that mean? Right? It's like no fear, he could do whatever he wants. He's a daredevil. But like he's the most self-destructive and unhealthy like superhero that like actually exists, because there's no ultimate disregard, or there's ultimately no regard for the relationships that he cultivates that are worthwhile, and there's no consideration for the long-term consequences of anything he does. That's kind of like the ultimate like epitome of all of his stories. I have no fear uh about like playing this legal game with my identity. I'm going to end up in prison eventually, but I don't care. I have no fear, right? And then he loses everything. And so fear, I think, in a healthy degree, fear of God, fear, I think, of the loss of that which is beautiful is really integral because you have a self-awareness of that which is most valuable. And so one of the things that I fear or have feared all the time, right, is like I fear deconstruction, or I fear that like fear apostasy. I don't think that'll happen, which there's an irony to that. But there's a fear of that which is like losing that which is most precious, right? Because that foundation has built so much else. It has built to a degree brotherhood or friendship or X or Y or Z. And so to abandon any kind of fear or to be fearless, right, in a way, I think would be to throw out any of the awareness of that which is most valuable. I feel like now I'm just repeating myself, so I'm done.
Yeah, Daredevil, he's lying to himself. He's afraid of actually having that real connect to really be a man.
Yes. Yeah.
Like that's what he's truly afraid of. And it's like he sounds like an alcoholic, actually, very self-centered. It's like it's this. I think that's well. I'm just gonna ring the bell that I've been wanting to ring forever, and this is why the shadow patriarchy, the shad trads out there, the shadow traditional dudes out there. We're living in a self-centered ontology. That's and we don't recognize it. We're so self-centered. The level of culture is so self-centered. You can't even recognize that it's just inward facing all the time. And the reason why I like the idea of the shadow patriarchy or the shadow matriarchy or the shad trad in general, this shadow thing is, Henry, you may not be able to have children, but you are shaping children. You are in the process of shaping men and women. And like there was a comment once I was talking about this, and the guy in the comment was like, every time we get in this stuff, we're always talking about this, and it always boils down to, why family, and you got to get married and have kids. Well, I'm never going to get married and I'm never going to have kids. It's like, yeah, but like, I really think that, like, I'm not just responsible for my own daughter. I'm responsible for Neil's daughter and Corey's children and my neighbors, right? I'm responsible for those people as well. Everything you do matters. And so that's the shadow patriarchy too. That's the shadow virtue is I am responsible for these people that maybe people I'll never meet 100 years from now, and that's the kind of attitude I need to assume and maintain.
Dan and then Gray. Dan, you got something?
Yeah, a couple things I'll try to. So I very much resonate with what you just said, Chad, and you too, Henry. And I wanted to just kind of like give a quick tip of the hat to Ron Copperman. I hope it's okay to say this. Ron told me like he doesn't have children, but I spent a couple hours with him at Midwestuary. He picked me up from the airport when I didn't have a ride. Very, very dad move right there. And my dad's been gone for a good while, but I kind of felt in a way like I was sitting next to Dad talking to Ron. So big love to you, Ron. You're a good man, and you make me want to be a good man too. And then also wanted to say something about fear. While you guys were talking, it occurred to me that to the extent that I'm afraid, it's often because there's something that I actually love, right? So a cynic might be like, oh, fear's just terrible. Like, why are you afraid? I'm like, well, why am I afraid? Well, it's because I have people in my life that are really precious to me and I love them, So I'm not sure where the line is between where fear ends and love begins. And maybe that brings us back to the fear of God or the love of God being the beginning of wisdom. I don't know. But then my third thing I wanted to say is I too have 4 P's for the shadow patriarchy. Principalities perverting the principle of patriarchy. So Yeah, well, I'll repeat that because I know it's a mouthful. Principalities perverting the principle of patriarchy. You see that a lot in media, and as a triple girl dad, I find myself constantly with the unenviable task of having to kind of sift through media, try to figure out just how inappropriate something is and why, without having to fully experience it all myself, which I can't even do. So I think you smell what I'm stepping on, but like recently had a conversation with my wife and daughter about this movie that's all the rage. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's the K-pop Demon Crushers or whatever. And anyway, just at a glance, I was just kind of like, eh, I don't know if these are going to be the people that rid us of the demons. You know what I mean? But yeah, particulars aside, those are my four P's. My contribution to the shadow patriarchy.
Okay, nobody's going to say anything. I'm going to read something really quick. It has to do with fear. And I picked this up in, of all places, you wouldn't believe it, but AA. Sorry.
Not AB.
Yeah, not AB, AA. All right. So we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no connection and no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem, or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Perhaps there's a better way, we think so. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play a role He assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us, and humbly rely upon Him. Does He enable us to match calamity with serenity? And this idea of fear, it's anytime I've ever been in fear, like whether it's a healthy fear or not, I think it's always that tension between my reliance upon Him or not. And uh, so I think that's just a healthy thing to remember. I think uh, as it relates to these fears. Am I trying to run the show again? You know, or is He the principal? So,
Ray, what were you going to say? I want to know what you're going to say too.
So, okay, I want to touch on the fear, seriousness. We've been using those two terms separately, and they are separate, but also tie into brotherhood a little bit. So Neil, Neil and Dan both, like you guys touched on the seriousness aspect a little bit. Neil, I can't remember how you phrased it. Um, the two things that you recognize in people, sort of. Was it seriousness? Is that the word that you used?
Yeah. That every moment matters.
Yes, sure.
Everything
Okay.
they
So
do, it matters.
in
The
my head, I
gravity of
was
it. Yeah.
in my head I was thinking seriousness, gravity. Okay. So there, and then Dan, you mentioned that in your local context, you feel like you sort of there's a lack of that seriousness or maybe that gravity, particularly. Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but maybe particularly on the part of men. And so I would connect like the this where does seriousness, like especially taken to a certain level, where does seriousness become fear, and where do those two terms kind of like merge a little bit, especially if you have next couched with it like the fear of God being a positive fear, and like related to the concept of awe, right? Like it's this, like you could use those three terms to circle like a sort of a state or a demeanor that is not fully captured by any of the three terms. and maybe not even by all three of them. But it's lately I've been thinking like within this frame of masculinity and what it means. One of my most often prayers as I walk like 4 to 10 miles a day with my daughter in our neighborhood, putting her to sleep in our carrier because she doesn't want to nap in the crib. And I work in it very often on times, and so I try to, I'm teaching tennis lessons right now, and so I am her main caregiver. My wife works remotely and feeds her, and I walk a lot to take her on naps, and in my better moments, I spend that time in prayer. And the most often thing I pray for is Lord, grow me like into a proper and full sense of what it means to be a man in the way that you showed, in the way that Christ showed, in the breadth and depth of not just emotion, not but sort of like the concept of mastery over emotion, and sort of like a kairotic mastery over emotion. Like his emotion and the demeanor that he seemed to take in every situation was perfectly suited to that situation, and was it representative of that emotion or that demeanor, like in its full depth. So you have of course like the fear that he seemed to feel in Gethsemane, and you have like the awe for the Father that he has at his baptism, and everything in between, like the love for Lazarus when Lazarus is dead, and just that, like that, whatever you want to call that, like he's weeping at the grave of Lazarus, um, and when I think about that, or when I read that inscription, I think about that as I'm praying this prayer. Like it's so overwhelming for me, um, of this vision of manhood that you get in Christ, and knowing that is he's the Son of God, but also that he left us his Spirit, and in some sense meant to empower us and grow us into, like he was the first fruits, right? And so to grow us into be men like him is so overwhelming for me when I consider the depth and the breadth of his, I know I used the word emotional, but really just like his being in every circumstance and in every demeanor. And where that ties into brotherhood, like Henry, you brought up the upper room. It just kind of struck me of thinking like, so Christ is who I just described him as being in all these different moments. And then in the upper room, like he says, you are no longer my servants, but you are my friends. And then he sends them out after his resurrection, and their brotherhood is what forms or is the seed of the church that we are supposed to emulate. And so all these different aspects of Christ and his demeanor in different situations, like it relates to the sort of talent and mastery conversation too, because it's like within a Christian brotherhood, like use TLC as an example of just like everyone brings different backgrounds and different talents and knowledge, relational capacity. Like Chad has this frame, like from his time in AA, that is so incredibly useful and colors in like an understanding of how humans change and brokenness and stuff that like I don't have from my background. And Corey brings this, and Neil, you bring that, and Henry, your circumstance is far different than my circumstance. And in a way, if we view it through this lens of like, man, Christ has given us his Spirit, that he has gone bodily, but now it's like, man, can the church, and specifically like men in the church, be this embodiment of all the fullness of Christ in our particularity, when we are together in brotherhood. And that is like the proper none of us is the fullness of that, but can we together, like, sort of, I don't know why this is sort of like a cliche phrase that my boss used, but like, a rising tide raises all boats. Um, like that image of the brotherhood raising each one of us into the most Christ-like uh, fulfillment of our particularity, but couched within brotherhood.
Yeah, the hive mind becoming the hive body. Is that a fair way to say it in some sense?
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Henry.
I kind of building off of like the idea of the brotherhood of like the tides. There's enough vibrancy and there's enough diversity and there's enough life within the brotherhood. I kind of wanted to, because we haven't brought it up, the masculine feminine tension, with regards to like the structures and stuff. So I this might sound like a silly question. Is there enough of the feminine embodied even within the brotherhood that it is sufficient? So as an example of if I'm going to be a eunuch or a celibate of some sort, there will be very little of a feminine presence in the personal, right? For obvious reasons. But is there enough of the feminine energy embodied within brotherhood or within certain spaces that that is not necessary to be in like countered within like kind of like the home setting, right? So who said it one time? I think it was ages ago. I heard Mark Lefebvre say it, right? Um the man builds the home, but the house, but the wife makes it a home. What happens if you don't have that? Is there life? How is the life brought into that? Is the brotherhood enough of that? That's
Yeah.
just
Yeah, like I think it's helpful to think of the instructor and the coach and the father and all the instantiations of what it could mean to be a father or to be a father for someone. Um, I think that part of the feminine is to be receptive, and I think that every one of us, and this is where it gets complicated, right? Like we're kind of walking on eggshells around part of this conversation because this has been a controversial topic to talk about for the past 100 years or so. Um, but every person, whether they be a man or a woman, I think has authority and has masculine roles and feminine roles that they are called to take up. Um, when you see somebody who has demonstrated mastery and humility, and I feel silly for not seeing it before. It's not about the arena. It's about like the agent and the arena coming together in the perfect way with perfect mastery and perfect humility. That's beauty. Like that's where the glinting light kind of shines through, and you get that's the part where everybody celebrates and stands up and says yes. Um, to be receptive to that when you see it, and to maybe, and it has to do maybe with your response to fear too, because I think fear is a thing that if you want to talk in terms of purpose, fear opens you up epistemologically, like it opens you up to change. That's what beauty does. And if you receive that, if you're open to that, then you're kind of taking up a feminine role in that sense. You are receiving what's being given to you. Even Jesus himself was feminine in relation to God the Father. Like he submitted himself fully to the will of the Father. That's completely scriptural. And I think that that's a role that's, appropriate for each of us to understand and take up depending on the specific arena we find ourselves in.
My experience with this, I had the the year before Anne and I started to date. I spent that whole year in building like building a very strong friendship with my best friend, who became my my best man, and we spent all the time together, and as like grown ass dudes, we're going in, we're helping, doing detox work together, we're doing, we're hanging out, in that relationship. I don't think I would actually be somebody who is um, attractive as a man to my wife, my girlfriend. who ended up becoming my fiance. I would not have been attracted to Anne if it wasn't for that relationship. Like that particular relationship, that brotherhood helped me to become somebody who can actually listen and talk and and like and it was interesting to see that. And I didn't know that was what was happening. I was like, but I knew that. Okay, the reason why I'm saying this is because like the year before that, I was like, just like my mind was all about like trying to get laid and all this stuff, and I was just completely distracted by this or what Dan you said that your four P's of the. I was like completely distracted, and it wasn't until I was like, no, dude, I'm gonna buckle down. I'm gonna actually try to live a spiritual life, and I'm gonna spend time just with the guys and just get to know the guys. And in doing that, I became somebody who was attractive to, who actually became the kind of guy um, that would be attractive to a woman. So that's interesting to me. It is, and so yeah. Anyways,
Chad, can I? That's a beautiful story, and I really want to know, like, what was it about that relationship with your friend? Like, because I can think of lots of dudes who hang out with the bros all the time, and it's the most disgusting thing ever that revolts women who see it. Like, what was it about that particular friendship that you think? Like, it sounds more like you were iron sharpening iron in that kind of relationship, like calling each other higher. Like, what was
yeah.
that like? How was it different?
Well, it was we were both pointed. We were both at a point of desperation in our. So he had come off of like 8 years of not really taking part in his recovery or spirituality, and he was practically suicidal. And my sponsor was sponsoring him, and we were just kind of going to the same meetings, and we're just like both desperate to kind of be different than what we are because we're both kind of like nihilistic and don't even know it. We're completely self-centered and don't know it. And our sponsor walked us through some steps. We had already been sober for a few years, and it was like there was a vulnerability there in sharing exactly where we were as friends, and we would actually we had a common goal of trying to help other alcoholics, and so we weren't pointed inward. We weren't like this idea of the self-centered. We were turned away from that self-centered ontology and became more others and God-centered. Like that principle, I think, took us off of ourselves, and um, and we were just in the trenches together doing this stuff, and it was a lot of fun. And like I wasn't trying to tell him where he was fucking up, and he wasn't trying to tell me where I was fucking up. Like, but there was a trust that was built there. We were able to have honest conversations in that way, and we were both seeking God and helping others. That was the highest thing. So
We had a good point to do final words, final round.
I guess.
You want to start, Henry?
Sure. Um, Final thoughts. I think that I maybe just to finish with what Chad has said, I think the ultimate goal of brotherhood is probably to serve one another and to serve each other in some capacity. And in that way, we are, um, I guess I'll be evangelical, doing what Jesus does, right? In some kind of small way, which then helps us to be his friend and do what he wants. Or not do what he wants, but like follow in his ideal. And I think that that's probably a decent place to start, even if we maybe didn't solve where masculinity's headed. I think that that's probably the best place is to find some guys. God, I hope I don't sound like all the boomers in my church. I hope like you could find some people who are able to draw out the positive masculinity, who can draw out the feminine within each other to be able to, you know, do the work that needs to be done for others according to the will of God. I'm done. That's all I got.
Guys, my daughter's crying. This has been fun. The future of masculinity is figuring out how to put a baby girl back to bed without your wife. So have a good
Good luck,
night,
Gray.
guys. See ya.
Have a good night.
Take care, Gray.
See ya.
Miles?
I did take away a lot from this, but I think the biggest thing I'm taking away is the necessity to give what you've been given.
Mm.
That we're all called to pour ourselves out. And I think Christ exemplifies that. And I would really direct it away from these, Henry, you've brought up like children, marriage. I would point it away from those things because to me, most of the time, the men that leave the greatest legacy, like Christ, the apostles, to my knowledge, they didn't have those things. And there's many, many other men who, even if they did have those things, we don't remember the names of their children, but we remember what they did, and we remember how they poured themselves out for other people. And so, but also, with that being the vertical, the horizontal being the brotherhood, we need each other. We need the participation of those who cannot have or do not have those, that marriage, the children. We need them to participate. We need the participation of everyone. Someone already said it. Like we need everyone to participate because we benefit from that perspective, and we count on those who have maybe more time and more freedom to take that word to others that those of us who have these obligations can't reach, and continue to pour themselves out in a space that we can't go. So that's what I'm taking away is that pouring myself out, and and the necessity of interactions like this where I hear other brothers talk about themselves doing that and how they're doing it and the challenges that they face as they do.
Corey?
Yeah, I guess I'm next.
Thank you, Miles.
There's a couple of things that I think I'm going to take away from this. And I'm going to be honest too. Like this was fruitful for me. This has given me a lot to think about. But I'm not satisfied with where the conversation is right now.
No, I'm going to continue this.
Yeah, and I think you should. Thank you for bringing us all together to do this, Neil. I think this will continue to be needed for the foreseeable future. But the things that I'm going to be pressing into for myself and what I would like to press into more with other people, as kind of playing off of what Dan was talking about, I think a lot of it has to do with not just willingly, but maybe even actively facing up to whatever your fear is, facing beauty, no matter what the outcome is. I think of, Henry, what you were talking about with being afraid of apostasy. I can really relate to that feeling. And there was actually a moment where I actually had to open up to that in a weird kind of way. And what's happened since then has been, I don't know, there's a sense that I feel like we have to really embrace the responsibility, I guess, of facing up to the fears, facing up to the beauty, and being willing to bear tension on behalf of other people, to include the tensions of not really knowing what you're talking about. Like when you fail to live up to mastery, when you fail to live up to the standard, and yet be willing to embrace the responsibility anyway because of where you are. Those are kind of the things that I think we didn't really talk about warfare, but Dan talked about psychological warfare, which is one of my favorite subjects. And I do think that it has to be all in. It really is for all the dice. I think this is good, but I think there needs to be more. And I appreciate getting to meet some of you and talking to all of you.
Hear, hear.
I love picking up on the little things in each of you that I can emulate. And one of the people that's kind of popped up for me a lot in different ways is Chad, and his willingness to be open and kind of, he has a real gift for going to the places where most dare not tread, but in a way that is disarming, and it just feels right, and it makes me want to do the same. So I'm going to share something that I was a little bit on the fence about sharing, and I was partially on the fence because I'm not sure like what it means, and I'm uncomfortable with that. So I'm realizing that just put this out here, and maybe it doesn't go so great, and I'm embarrassed or whatever, but I don't care because Chad's my friend. You guys are my friends too, and it's okay. But I don't usually remember my dreams or have dreams that I'm aware of, but last night I did, and effectively it was this. It was some kind of group situation, mostly family, but I feel like there was kids around, maybe some friends or something like this. And a large snake goes across the floor. And I was pretty sure it was a copperhead. And I was nervous. I was afraid. But I wanted to take action. And my wife's like, "Oh no, that's not a copperhead. That's not what they look like." Yada yada. And all of a sudden we're like debating like whose taxonomy of snakes is like, more on point or whatever, and what are we gonna do? So like there's a little bit of back and forth, and then it's gone from the point where the snake's in like an open area. He's kind of like under something, and it's not clear what's gonna happen next. Like, is he gonna just disappear? And then if he disappears, like, well, where is he? Is he really gone? Probably not, because we already know he's in the house. And like these are the things kind of going through my mind. I'm doing like this quick calculus, and I'm like, well, I can eliminate the snake, but it'll be messy. You know what I mean? And like the mess is guaranteed. And like it's not like in the main part of the house, but it's like over here, and that'd be bad. And my wife wasn't real keen on that idea. All right, dream's over. I wake up. Today I go on a run, and same run I always do, about 2 miles, just a mile out and back on this country road I live on. And as I'm thinking about like, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to pitch? I remember this strange dream that I had. And about 30 yards later down the road, I encounter a snake. It's dead. And the snake's dead, and it's dead in a particular way. This kind of gives me goosebumps. The snake's head was crushed. The rest of the snake is completely intact. Anyway, I took a picture of the snake. My photography is not so great. My angle isn't so good. If I was smarter, I would have taken it from the side so you could see that the head was crushed. But no
Looks
other
kind of
part
like a
the snake.
copperhead.
Well, I actually think it's not, because the head itself isn't copper, and I did. Anyway, I can send you the photo if you're curious. I'm pretty sure it's like an eastern rat snake or something along these lines. They're pretty common around here. But there again, like that's the point of like, I'm like, okay, the story's perfect if it's a copperhead, and then I'm right in the dream, and like, but it doesn't have that. It doesn't have that clean resolution. But the fact that the snake's head was crushed was a comfort to me. So I wanted to share that.
Real quick, you know how Mary is often portrayed in architecture and sculpture?
Hmm.
Corey probably knows where I'm going, but
That has to do with the snake?
she's always crushing the head of the snake under her heel. Yeah.
And her name is Mary, so that's pretty cool. My wife, that is.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's some
Symbolism
pretty good
happens.
That's some pretty good taxonomy because I would have not. I have no idea what a copperhead looks like. I
Well,
know
they
what a
actually have a
rattle.
copper head. That's the key.
Oh, okay, okay. I know what a rattlesnake looks like because it has a rattle, but that's about it. Um, it was really, yeah. It's interesting. It was really good to have this conversation with you guys. But I'm with you, Corey. Like I was thinking that too. Like, yeah, it'd be good to continue this. Because I felt like there was the thing about these this type of conversation is like it doesn't get thinky talky, which is really good. And so sometimes in thinky talky conversations, you can drop into some kind of interesting pockets, and so it's harder, I think, for us to be. And I think this conversation required a bit more vulnerability, and I think we got it, which was real. That was cool. But I'm right there with you, Corey. I think we could have. I'm not fully satisfied with. Like there has to be more for sure. Um, and yeah, I think the takeaway is um, something to do with and I think you already said it, Corey. Like forget about the outcomes. It's not really the outcomes aren't what's important. Like even to be a servant, like I'm trying to how do I best lay this out? Um, I so when I'm trying to how do I say this? When I first got into recovery, they used to talk a lot about, if you want to stay sober, you have to help other alcoholics. And so I thought, well, I'm going to help other alcoholics so I stay sober. And then what ends up happening is you realize that you don't do it to stay sober. You do it um, because it becomes a part of you. You become compelled to do it. It's a joy. It's a responsibility. It's like you don't do it to get something. Like it's, you know what I mean? And I think that's where I hope that and that's what friendship is, right? You don't become a friend to get something to get a friend, you know. And um and I think that yeah, this is going to take all hands on deck, like you were talking about, Dan. Like everybody grab a fucking shovel. It's time to get digging. Um, and the other thing is like, the, excuse me, this can be very joyful. I think it ought to be fun. Like we want to have fun. This isn't like it's not like, oh, gotta do shit. It's like, no, man. This is like I get to participate in something that's really cool, and I get to have fun doing it, and I get to meet you guys along the way. I get to sit in the living room, in freaking Illinois, where my friend lets me stay there because our plans fell through, and then I get to have a estuary meeting with Miles and Noah Foxman and Neil and my wife and Miles' wife, and that was like, and Spoons was there. Like that was a lot of fun. Did I go to Midwestuary to get anything? No, I went there to have fellowship, and so uh, yeah, I don't really have anything profound to say other than I really appreciate you guys, and like you guys are good men, and I feel like I'm in really good company, like, and I'm not really worried about where things are headed, and I disagree, Corey. The whole conversation was warfare. That was the conversation. So,
I think you're right. Dan, you said exactly what I was. So I think it was Mattis who, in his letter that he wrote to the Marines that were about to invade Iraq, if I remember right, he said something along the lines of, "It's on your young shoulders that rest the hopes of mankind. fight with a happy heart and a strong spirit.
Mm,
Yeah.
sweet.
Oh,
Well, that's all I
this
got
was
for today.
fantastic. I want to leave you guys with an image because it's something I've contemplated a lot recently. This is where I think we are. I want to leave you guys with the image of King Saul, the big, strong, strapping man in charge of everything. And there's someone standing in his shadow. There's a little guy. It's a very tricky little guy. And he's got curls and a harp and a slingshot. And maybe he's got like 100 guys in a cave somewhere. And maybe he has multiple opportunities to actually slay King Saul and he doesn't. And I think we're at that kind of crossroads, precipice, whatever it is. And I want to leave you guys with that image. And I'm trying to encourage Chad to read First and Second Samuel. And yeah, because I'm definitely gonna, we're definitely gonna host more of these, one way or the other. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Thanks for hosting, Neil.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thanks, Neil.
All right, I'm stopping recording. You guys can hold on.